My name's Daniel Boone. I'm 33 years old. I was inspired to work in the woods by Russell Corey. He came out and logged my parents' property when I was 10, and he was using a Garrett 21 skidder. And watching him fell trees and skid and deck with that thing, I was hooked ever since. And let me set some chokers. That was pretty fun. And when I was 17, I worked for Don Kroll in the woods, setting chokers under his 071 Medill. Mason Kroll was the hook tender. Adam Bowling was the rig and slinger. Jesse Morris was the chaser. Jimmy Mange, rad and yarder. Don was loading trucks. And Jason Henninson was the processor operator. Worked for him for a little bit, and then I went to work for Jason Bowling of JSB Logging at 18 years old. Ran skidder and chased for Jason, and man, I feel bad for him because I think Jason spent more time frustrated throwing his hard hat than cutting out in front of me because I was not a very good skidder operator or chaser, and he spent a lot of time teaching me. And yeah, anyway, it took a while for me to get that worked out. When Jason was in between jobs, I worked for his dad Steve and Jason's uncle Sam, running skidder and chasing and running excavator. And when I was 21, I hit the big time and went to work for Shane Rofe of RMH Logging. Shane was handling Phillips hook tender, and he bought the operation from Pat when he decided to retire. Shane got the 737 Skagit, the line truck, the 892 log loader, a bunch of rigging. I don't know what else he ended up getting. Fuel truck, I think. And I worked for Shane. We started working on Wainuchi and up above the Wainuchi Dam. And we were so high up in elevation you could see the harbor, Aberdeen Harbor from there, I think is what it was, and you can see the dam right below us. I worked with, let's see, Jeff Corey and Shane Wolford, everybody called him Wolfie, and let's see, there's a guy from Hoquiam named Dave that ran shovel. I don't know his last name. Craig Barr ran processor, and Jesse Morris was the chaser. Did that job, worked a job in Matlock, and then went to work in Forks up on a Rainier job. It was subbed out from Rygards. It was a big tower job, but they didn't have the means to do it with their green bean. That's where we came in. And up there I got hurt. I was helping the shovel operator pick up a steel tank, and we were using a big chain, and I put it through the grapples and it slipped out. The chain did, and I put it in again and it slipped out. When I went in to grab this chain and put it back in the grapples, he accidentally hit the grapple close and it grappled my hand right across here like that. And right where the I don't know, what do you call them, the jaws or the teeth come together, there's a plate in there for I guess it helps to grab like small wood. Anyway, that is what got my hand, and it hurt so bad, and the shock from seeing the grapple close on my hand, I yanked my hand out real quick, and it just made it hurt even worse. I was wreathing in pain, and I was too scared to take my White Ox glove off, thinking my hand was going to be totally messed up. It ended up being a boxer break right here on the outside of my palm. And after that, I stayed out of logging for a little bit, healing up. I did some road grading for a while and odd jobs, and then eventually I got back to working for Jason Bowling, and then again I worked for his dad Steve, and then his uncle Sam, and Did that, and then I went back to work for Shane when those guys were slow, and I was setting chokers for him. At this point, Jay Stickney was working there, and he couldn't find any other rigging guys, so it was just Jay and I for a while. Jay got hurt, and then I ended up being the rigging slinger, and Jeff Corey came back, and then Philip Bowling and Andrew Bowling came to work there. We finished the Mount Jupiter job, and then I ended up going to Alaska fishing because there wasn't really anything else to do with Shane. We were waiting on a job out by Lake Crescent. So I worked up in Alaska, and then came back down and worked for Jason when I got back, and then I would go back up to Alaska and then come back down and work for Jason. And I got my Class A CDL. Don Kroll helped me get it. He was giving me, driving lessons and stuff. I drove his pumpkin-colored Superliner Mack log truck for a little bit. I went up to Alaska and worked for a cannery running their container yard, moving fish containers and stuff like that, 40-foot containers, 20-foot containers, and did that for a season. And the next year I went to work for a barge company that owned all the containers and worked as a truck driver and mechanic and a barge hand, just kind of an all-arounder. And when I came back down from Alaska, I was working up in Naknek and Dillingham when I was up there, and I worked on the Aleutian chain a little bit. No, I actually I went down the Aleutian chain once. Sorry. Anyway, I came back down to Washington and did a little stint working for Aaron and Sam Bowling under their Skagit swing yarder, pulling rigging, and that was pretty cool. Aaron Bowling was the timber faller / hook tender. Garrett Loring was the chaser / hook tender. Sam Bowling loaded trucks with his Cabelco excavator, and a guy named Dan, and then there's another guy named Dirk. They're from the Morton area. Dan at the time owned the yarder and ran it, and Dirk was the choker setter. Dirk was an older Indian guy. He had to have been in his early 60s, and he was pretty cool to work with. He was telling me stories about when he started working in the woods. He was blowing choker holes with dynamite at 16 or 17 years old or something. That was pretty cool. Anyway, when that was done, I went to work at the diesel shop for this barge company in Seattle. And after working there it was winter, my girlfriend and I decided to go to Australia on a work travel visa and just kind of tramp around. And I'd heard there was logging down there, so I was really interested in working in the timber industry in Australia. So we landed in Tasmania, bought a hippie van, cruised around the countryside. I went to 38 or 40 different logging / trucking outfits looking for work, and there was nothing available because at the time this big sawmill down there, Guns Limited, they had a deal going with Forest Tasmania to log native hardwood trees, and it had all these activists up in arms. People were burning equipment, they were chaining themselves to equipment and trees, and there was vandalism, and I mean, you can imagine, it was nuts. So after a month and a half in Tassie, we ended up going up to the mainland of Australia, and I bumped into some Christian loggers in between Melbourne and Canberra, the capital, on a Saturday in this town called Batlow. And I told him what I was about, gave him a resume. The guy said that he was interested in having me work for him driving log truck. So we left from there. I ended up getting a ticket on the Hume Highway for $1,000 because I was driving this hippie van with no license and insurance. That was real special. And we made it to Brisbane, ditched the van on a side street. It wasn't in my name, so ditched the van, caught a bus to Surfer's Paradise, lived on a hippie commune for like 3 weeks. The guy called me and told me if he'd fly me down to Wagga Wagga, pick me up, they'd go to Chumit, and I could live with him and drive truck for him. I thought, well, this is pretty sweet. So I did that. I flew down there. I drove log truck for him for 6 months, and let me tell you what, that was an experience, because I wasn't used to driving on the I was used to driving on the wrong side of the road, on the wrong side of the vehicle, but driving a big rig, now that's a different story. The windshield wiper knob and turn signal is orientated different over there, and I had to learn to shift with my left hand, split with my left thumb. It was a massive learning curve, and it took 3 days just to work out shifting properly and not miss shifts and stuff like that. And after that, it was all good. I drove a hay rack basically, and we were grossing about 94,000 pounds with this hay rack. Worked for him for 6 months. I got to run his yarder. He had a Washington 88 with it was butt rigging with a rider block, so it was a Grabinski system. And I got to work in the rigging a little bit too. And after my 6-month visa was up with this guy, I went and worked for another outfit driving log truck over there. And then it got to where they wanted to keep me on the first logging outfit wanted to keep me on to run their tower side, and I'd stay on a long-term visa for like 5 years, but they couldn't get it to work because technically the forest industry isn't they don't consider people in forestry to have skilled jobs, so I couldn't stay. I had a job lined up in New Zealand to go run yarder, and at the time I felt compelled to go back to the States. My grandma was dying, and so I went and saw her one last time. And while I was in the States, I decided, I don't want to go to New Zealand, I want to stay here. So I ended up getting into log trucking. Matter of fact, my friend Jason Bowling went with me to Ritchie Brothers, where I bought my first truck. I was intending on getting a Kenworth, but it went across the auction block and sold for too high of an amount. So I was sitting there kind of going, okay, well, what's next? And Jason said, Dan, there's this International coming across the block. You got to bid on it, man. It's going cheap. And I didn't even think. I threw up my bidder card and I won the bid. I didn't even look at this truck, but it ended up being a really great rig. I drove it for 6 months. It was a 83 International 4300. And I drove it for 6 months, hauling for Bauer Logging and Logs R Us out of Chehalis. And Eric Bauer had a truck for sale, so I bought his 05 W900L long logger. It was a 7-axle setup. Jason bought my old truck. I hauled for Bauer's almost exclusively until late 2014. I sold the truck, started mobile mechanicking. I did that for about 6 months, and then went to Alaska, came back. Bauer's yarder engineer was retiring, and Jim asked me, hey, do you know anybody that wanted to come run yarder for us? And I said, well, hey, Jim, I would love to come run yarder for you guys. That's my dream job. So I sold my shop truck and sold my welder and all that. I went to run yarder for Bauer's, and it was really cool because I got to help them install a brand new 8V92 Detroit making 450 horse. I got to help them design a tilting cab using the cab tilt stuff from an old log loader so that the cab would tilt over the fuel tank. I helped him do a 4th guy line drum, helped him put a tube on there from a 4 guy line machine with the swivel shiv for the Skyline, and Modern Machinery did a hydraulic undercarriage from a 330 Kobelco, and new shafts, new bearings, new bushings, new friction material, new brake bands, new brakes. It was practically a brand new machine, and I got to repaint it once it got out of the shop. And we had a brand new Eagle 6 car that was only 4 or 5 months old, so I was running a brand new setup, and I thought that was sweet. It was really awesome. And in between, I did a little bit of shovel logging with them, loading trucks and whatnot. Not to brag, but I got my chip and saw load time down to 8 minutes. That was my quickest, so I was pretty stoked about that. And let's see, I went to I had the opportunity to go work in New Zealand. Now, I was married at this point. I had gotten married in August of 2013, married my best friend, Kara, and the reason why I got out of log trucking is because the hours were terrible, and I never got to see my wife. You know the drill. Anyway, ended up where I had a chance to go and log in New Zealand, and everything worked out perfect. My wife and I and our little boy, he was a year and a half old at that point, we went down to New Zealand. I was running processor down there. It was a Valmet 475 with a 325T Satco head. This head was huge. It had a 43-inch butt saw and topping saw, and it weighed like 8,000 pounds. It was a monster, and it would plow through anything you grabbed a hold of. I was processing radiata pine. The biggest problem I had was everything was metric, so I had to figure out how to eyeball what 8 centimeters, 10 centimeters, 12, 14, and 22 centimeters look like while sitting in the cab for, quality control stuff, and then figure out how to quality control, look outside the cab and see, okay, 2 meters, 2.2, 3.9, 3 meters, 4.9, 5.5, 5.9, and 6.1 meters, what that looked like. And it was really rough. It was a 9 to 12 sort job every time. We had 2 pulp sorts, 2 export sorts, 2 domestic sorts. There was a pole sort for like fence posts, and there was a chip and saw type of sort. There's 2 types of peeler sorts. There was partial peeler and then full peeler. They called it prune. Same thing for us over here in the States. And so anyhow, the idea was going down there that and this is the outfit that I worked for in Australia that had the yarder. They wanted me to come down and run their tower side. They were going to buy a swing yarder, and currently they were doing ground base, so they wanted me to come down, run their processor, and then they were going to get a tower and I'd run that. And it ended up not working out with them getting a yarder. They were having some issues, and a couple key guys in the business quit, and at that I got disheartened. I lost motivation to be there. My wife's father died. She had come back to the States, and I was broke down and sad, so I said, I'm ready to just call it quits. So I came back to the States in September of 17, and I worked for Bowers as an all-arounder, and then that lasted until January or February of 18, and then I went to work for Tom French running log loader and processing logs with a CTR, and I did that until March when I was cutting timber for him. I got really sick, and I thought maybe I pulled a muscle in my back or had a problem with a disc. It turned out, 9 days later I went to the hospital because the pain got so bad I couldn't sleep. It turned out my appendix ruptured. So they rushed me into surgery. They had to cut 12 inches of my colon out because it was starting to die, and found a tumor in my colon, and they said, it might be cancerous, so they had to biopsy it. So I had the pleasure of sitting in the hospital for a day and a half thinking I had the big C. So I put some things into perspective. Let me tell you what. So I ended up deciding I don't want to do logging anymore. I want to do something different. So I decided I wanted to get a job with Jefferson County as a equipment operator, and I put in for the job and got it, and I love it. I'm glad I did it. I never look back. I get more time with my family. The shorter commute is awesome. I'm working 410s. It's great. And as far as, like, do I have any advice for a young person that wants to get into logging? If you really feel that you have to do logging, put your nose to the grindstone, keep your ears open, and ask questions, because the workforce is retiring, and they need guys in every aspect of it. And I wish things were a little bit different with the Forest Service in terms of their harvesting, but I realize they got their hands tied with environmentalists, so whatever. It's probably never going to change. I started the YouTube channel in 2007. I had bought a log truck from Sam Bowling. It was a 56 Kenworth. I was doing a restoration on it, and I couldn't really find much on the internet to help me, in my quest to kind of think, how do I want to do this? So I thought, I'm just going to chronicle this restoration and put it online. If there's somebody else that is doing this, they'll be able to look it up and, maybe get some ideas. So that's how that started. And at this point in 2019, in October, my wife and I have two beautiful little boys. One's 4 years old, the other guy is a year old, and it's just awesome. I love it. And I don't remember if I already went over this, but when I was in New Zealand, I got to meet up with Sam Nybor, SWN02. He runs Yarder for DG Glenn out of Napier, and I got to spend the weekend with him, and that was so cool. He's a really neat guy. And we just talked and talked and talked. It was really great. I love that. Something that's on my mind and heart, and I wanted to share this with you. I didn't talk about it before, but when I was in Australia, I gave my life to Jesus Christ and accepted him as my personal savior. Now, this was a massive thing for me. It was a total life-changing event. I was completely set free from the sin that I'm born into. I was set free from my addiction to alcohol and drugs, tobacco, pornography, womanizing, and chasing after money. That's all I cared about, those things I mentioned. And Jesus set me free from that. I didn't make a conscious decision to not do that stuff. After I accepted Jesus into my heart, it all went away. I didn't have a desire for it anymore, and it was absolutely miraculous. And I had joy in my heart. I didn't used to have any joy whatsoever chasing after all that stuff. And the way that all came about was when I was 18, I knew who God was, and I had an issue with a girlfriend at the time, and I just said, screw God, I don't want to have anything to do with him, and turned away from him. Okay, well, fast forward to Australia. I'm working with these Christians, and one of the business owners talked to me and said, Daniel, you need to give your life to Jesus and stop running around chasing money and doing all this stuff you're doing. And I said, whatever, screw that, I don't want to listen to you. Well, he prayed with me that my heart would be opened and that I would receive the Word of God. And I was balling my fists up as he was praying with me because I wanted to punch him. I didn't want to hear that. But he said, Daniel, go back home and read through John and read through Romans in a Bible. And if you have any questions, talk to me. And so I did. I went home and I read through the Bible, through John and through Romans. I felt convicted that this is for real, that Jesus Christ is for real. And I still had a hang up though. I didn't want to stop what I was doing. I was having fun, you know, living life and all that good stuff. Well, I was standing in the kitchen that morning making coffee. The log truck broke down. For some reason I wasn't working on it or something else. And you know how in your mind's eye, if you close your eyes, you can picture things? For some reason I closed my eyes, and in an instant I saw what looked like a hand outstretched, and there was sand being poured out into it, and the hand was grasping at the sand to try and catch it. And by the time the sand was all done being poured out, there was nothing, not one grain left in this hand. And that represented the years of my life wasted chasing after all of these things of the world when I turned away from God. And I thought, I was in a bad place. I realized, oh my goodness, I got nothing. I don't have anything, and I've made boatloads of money working in Alaska, and I've been single all this time practically. Oh, it wasn't good. And I realized the depth of my depravity, and I broke down in the kitchen and said, Jesus, I want you to come into my heart and wash away this slate and make me whole and cleanse me and make me clean. And I felt like this million candle power light shone into all the dark places of my heart and illuminated all these little places that I was hiding things and being deceitful and sneaky. And it was so awesome, because at that point I was rejuvenated. I felt fresh and clean and new. And like I said to you before, all this stuff that I was addicted to was gone. I didn't have a want for it. And I had joy where there was once none whatsoever. It was so cool. And I tell you, I'm here to say the truth right now, okay? I don't care what anybody else tells you. Jesus Christ came to earth in the flesh as the Son of God and died on a cross and rose again on the third day so that you and I could be set free from our sin, okay? We're born into it. There's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do that is going to be good enough to attain salvation in of yourself. It's only through Jesus Christ. And I recommend, if you don't know Jesus, go in a Bible and look through John and Romans. If you got questions, email me or talk to a pastor at a local church. My email is danielmboone@gmail.com. Hit me up in the comments, whatever. But this is serious, life-changing stuff, and you have to know Jesus. You're not going to go to heaven without him. You're not going to have eternal security or have joy in your heart and actually be set free from your sin unless you know Jesus Christ. Okay, so just throwing that one out there. And it's a serious thing, okay? Take it very serious. So that's a little bit about me. If you got any more questions or want to know anything, hit me up in the comments. Can't really think of much more. I've got so many stories, I just don't know where to even start as far as logging goes. When I was running yarder, this poor green guy started working for us, and his girlfriend was an activist, and she didn't want him working in the woods, but he really wanted to work in the woods, so he did it. And the guys were messing with him out in the rigging, and they made him hike up the hill like 400 or 500 feet to go get a bucket of choker grease, and then they made him hike up the hill again the next day and had him go get some choker holes. I mean, it was terrible. They messed with him really bad. I can't even think of half the stories right now to tell them to you, and then we're at like 29 minutes. You're probably bored by now anyhow. So thanks for watching. Check out my top subscriptions on my main page over on the right side. They've got great content. You'll love every one of their channels and what they're putting out. Have a great day. Thanks for watching, and again, take Jesus seriously and read a Bible through John and Romans, because this salvation thing this is your life, okay? We're not promised much in life other than death and taxes, but you have a decision to make to accept Jesus or deny him, and by not making a decision, you're denying him. So keep that in mind. If you know Jesus is your Savior, I applaud you, and I'm thankful for you. And I guess that's it. So have a great day. Bye now.